We have our next applicant. We're waiting for just a moment to make sure that they're here. Okay, sorry, Commissioners. We are, this is item 10. It's an application for Certificate of Appropriateness of Borough of Manhattan, docket number 194140. This is 81 Charles Street, located within the Greenwich Village Historic District. It's a French Second Empire-style row house built circa 1867. The application is to construct a rooftop and rear additions and to excavate the cellar and rear yard.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Julianne Wiesner, Chianese Preservation staff. 81 Charles Street is located on the north side of Charles Street between Bleecker Street and West 4th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. The proposal is to construct rooftop and rear additions and to excavate the basement and rear yard. None of the proposed work will be visible from public thoroughfares except for the top portion of the flues. The excavation will not extend to the rear lot line, and the grade level of the rear yard will match that of the adjacent rear yards. I would now like to introduce the architect, Wayne Turret, who will describe the proposal in more detail.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Wayne Turret with Turret Architects. As Julianne described, we're proposing an addition on the roof in the back and excavation in the rear. I'll go through it in more detail now. You can see our building here. The red is the addition. And you could see in that plan the various additions on that street. A number of years ago, we did this addition and this renovation. This is our existing site, and this is our new site looking from the sky down. This is our addition on the roof, and this is our addition on the rear, and this is the rear yard. Again, that's a blow-up of that. I think this is working. Oh yeah, this is a blow-up of our site here. You can see the front facade of the existing building, and you can see the proposed front facade. This is our addition, but set way back, and this is a stair bulkhead right here. And the rest of this is merely fencing, and this is a metal fence in front, and this is a wooden fence in the back. And in the back, facing the back, is a pergola. Again, this is our, sorry, can I move this? Sure. Okay. This is the existing rear elevation. This is where we are in reference to the other buildings next door. The two other buildings next door have additions. This is a two-story addition with a third-floor terrace. This is a neighbor with a one-story addition. So our building is set back. Our proposed building is to bring the building to the 30-foot rear, 30-foot yard from the rear lot line, which brings us a little bit forward of these two additions. We also plan to retain all the brick and the window openings of the top two floors, except for this one, which we'd like to make a door which goes out onto the terrace. And then we have a two-story addition here with more glass and a balcony. This is the existing condition right now. Again, from here up, this will all be retained. This is the rear yard as it exists. This building is on Ferry Street facing us. It's going under renovation right now. And this is, again, this is our building. stair bulkhead again, right here, and this is fencing to cover up the mechanical equipment. This is a section of our building. Basically, changing the elevation of the third floor. The roof, which slopes now, is going to be lowered slightly, so our addition is less visible. The cornice stays the way it is. The cellar stays the way it is here, but then we have to excavate it out in the back. And you can see this is our proposed. We drew what we're proposing here, but this is more accurate. This is our proposed section. And you can see on the basement floor, we're dropping the floor down slightly, and we're dropping the cellar floor down slightly. The excavation goes short of 5 feet of the back lot line. This dotted line shows the line of the balcony we're proposing on the second floor of the addition. Again, this is more of a detail of the bulkhead and the addition. So this is our neighbor's addition, and this is our addition, and this is the stair bulkhead, which rises above that. These are chimneys, and this is from another direction, and this is the entrance to that stair bulkhead. This gives a better illustration. What doesn't really show up well here is that this addition here is very close to about this level of our addition, which intersects our stair bulkhead. We did some renderings so you can see it a little better, what this will end up looking like. Again, here's the front, which will be brought back to the original condition. This addition is set back from the street, further back than our neighbors. You can see this addition here, how high it is in reference to ours. And you can see the stair bulkhead sloping back, and this is our pergola and wood fencing, and there's a metal fence around here. In the rear, you can see the, again, pergola, the stair bulkhead, metal railing, the chamfered frame around the addition of the roof, the existing rear fabric, brick fabric, and then our addition here. And it's, in the rear, we propose to use wood windows to keep it warm and residential. Now, this is our rear yard. This is all plantings back here, and this is a skylight along here going down to the cellar. And you can see our neighbors' additions as well. This one comes up about as high as ours. This one is only 1 story. Section again, showing basically we're lowering this, we're excavating this out, we're lowering that floor, we're changing the height of this floor. This is a detail of that chamfer in the addition on the roof. This is our mock-up, and these are photos of the mock-up in various points of the street. So this is view 1. And you can see this is here. This is the flues that are visible. These are the flues that are visible. Again, the only thing that's really visible from any of these are the flues, except there's one location on Bleecker Street, which I'll get to, where you can see a bit more. What you are seeing through this view here, this yellow, happens to be the railing of the addition. And one thing else to point out is that there are a number of flues on the block that are visible. Again, these are neighboring flues. This is ours. And these are comparisons between the existing plans and our plans. So this is the cellar floor, the basement floor, first floor, second floor, third floor, and fourth floor. Fourth floor didn't exist. We're proposing an addition on the fourth floor. And on the roof, we're proposing a bulkhead to come out in the back, the stucco for the sides of the addition, the weathered cedar for the fencing around the backyard, and we propose to paint the visible throughs gray. Again, this is that rendering, and these are also showing some of the buildings on this block. This was the building that we did a number of years ago. This is a apartment block across the street, so that's actually much taller than any of these, and this is our outpost. So, any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions? Questions right now? All right, why don't we take testimony? Sarah Bean Appman?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sarah Bean Appman, Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation. GVSHP has a few issues with this proposal. First, any restoration of removed historic features needs to be executed with attention to historic detail. In the case of the rails at the stoop, this is not the case. The proposed rails are generic and run-of-the-mill, and we suggest that the applicant look to historic examples along any number of the row house-lined streets in the district, including Charles Street. We also have concerns regarding the proposed rooftop and rear additions. We appreciate that the rear addition is 2 stories in height, thus leaving the top 2 floors of the rear facade relatively intact. However, the rear addition as well as the rooftop addition are poorly thought out in terms of their blank, random picture window look and the non-matching cement board cladding. Both will be highly visible additions that will negatively impact the integrity of the building and the block. We do not believe that as currently presented, they rise to the level of appropriateness warranted for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Cassie Glover.
Hello, my name is Cassie Glover. I'm the resident of 85 Charles Street. I would like to correct what the architect was saying. My home was actually it's not a 4th floor addition. Our home was built historically by a completely separate architect at the time of the division of the Warren Street Farms. They have nothing to do. That's why my house looks out of context to the rest of this house. The roof deck in the addition to this home it's completely out of context, out of place. It's an additional story is unnecessary. This home does not need more space. The owner of this home could have afforded more space on another block. There are plenty of homes in the West Village that have this amount of space that he's proposing to add to his home. It's unnecessary. It's out of context. It's egregious, and it's almost an insult to all the neighbors on Charles Street that have worked so hard and love their street so much that to have this out of place, it's a black eye, and it's not acceptable. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. The next speaker is Bettina. Yes. Vitaline.
Bettina Vitaline. Good afternoon. I'm the owner of 83 Charles Street. I'm actually right on the picture here. I'm the person who has the glass house on the top. And my first point, I would like to point out that this is absolutely not a correct rendition of what my glass house looks like. It is exaggerated in size. It is only a third of the roof. It is much smaller. It leaves a complete circle around so that people can walk. I understand that on some levels people would like to put something on their roofs. I did that when I did my house 20 years ago. I did not take away any views from anybody. I also was completely in line. Nothing is visible from my roof. I also would like to point out, which is really, really important, that I was the first house that was being renovated in that block. And it was 20 years ago, and there was no, the gardens had no fences. So when I had found out what my space is, I also had a soil study done. And I was informed that on the ground is a huge piece of granite. And I was advised not to drill into it. Now that piece of granite definitely extends within the house next door, which is 81 Charles Street. So as a result of this, I planted bamboo, which is shallow, and a small tree. I have very serious objections to the extension because I really feel it will negatively impact the structural ability of all of the houses around it. I also do agree that I think it's an egregious disregard of what this block is, which happens to be still historically very intact, both in the front and in the back. And I think it is incredibly how disregardful it has been about the concerns of the neighbors. And I'm kind of speechless, to be very honest, to say that with what I've seen now as a rendition, which is much worse than I ever had anticipated. On top of which, the extension on the second floor is also not really necessary. There is a nice extension on the bottom. We had that as well, and we had not plenty of light in the kitchen. It's completely sticks out. It completely alters the historic site and view and the architecture of the environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mary Tucker.
Good afternoon. My name's Mary Tucker. I live on Perry Street, across the back garden from 81 Charles. My kitchen and bedroom windows face it. I'm here to testify against the addition of another floor to this property. The south side of Charles Street is the rare Manhattan street that is all townhouses. These houses are almost all uniform in height and scale. I urge you to protect the special character of this unusual street, which would be altered if you allow the owner of number 1 to construct this additional floor, changing a 4-story house to one of 5 floors. I regret that you've already permitted additions to number 83 and 85, but they're set back much smaller and do not do harm like this would do. Please do not establish a precedent that could lead to other additions to the roofline of this historic and beautiful street. I've been told that sunshine and light are not your concerns, but it feels less than truthful to omit that issue from my testimony. The construction of this addition would block sun and sky from everyone in my building as we look out towards the south of our back windows. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers on this item? Yes. Christabel?
May I just add something? Christabel Goff for the Society for the Architecture of the City. You heard about granite subsoil. Don't take that lightly. We had an incident on Christopher Street. The stable yard next to 1 Christopher Street on the north side had that, and it was ignored. And when they started drilling through, it shook houses as far as Gay Street. Someone I knew had china falling off the walls. It creates incredible vibrations, and the normal, don't worry, the buildings department will handle it. I think you need to think about that in this case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more speakers on this item? The Community Board 2 recommends a few things. It recommends approval of the stoop and entry rear yard extension and chimney flues, provided they're moved to a less visible location. They also approve the penthouse. It's not visible from any thoroughfare. And they deny the inappropriate ironwork of the front facade, which is being done at staff level. And they deny the excavation unless the usual cooperation with the neighbors for inspection and monitoring takes place, as well as every precaution is taken to ensure the integrity of the buildings. Okay. Do we have questions for the applicant? And do you want to respond to any of the issues raised? Okay. All right. If there are no other questions, we can close the hearing. Okay. Comments? Yes, Michael, go ahead.
I think that the rooftop addition looks like there is precedent for that on this block, but I think that the bulkhead beyond that seems excessive to me. The bulkhead beyond it is we've seen examples of rooftop access that's a lot less tall and bulky. A hatch would meet code as far as I understand it. We've been shown projects here. the fact that it's not visible is a factor, I think, but I think just in terms of scale and relative to the other buildings on the block, I think I'd prefer to see the bulkhead removed.
Okay, I think they may have to,
We saw hatches here a few weeks ago.
oh, okay.
Yep, I agree with that statement.
Yes, other commissioners?
I'm usually relatively accepting of rooftop additions. And I know that this one can't be seen from the street, and I think it's pushed back far enough. I agree with what's just been said, by the way, about the bulkhead for the stair. But I'm a little concerned also about the rear, the view from the rear from this block. And I know that it's not a public thoroughfare, but the question of overwhelming the building, I think, which is something that we do talk about here, is germane here, particularly given the rest of the block, or at least what we assume is the rest of the block. And I'm just wondering if that if we do allow, the addition on the roof, I'm thinking that the scale of it, by being pushed back only a couple of feet or whatever it is, could kind of overwhelm this building, and it's the overwhelmingness that I'm bringing up here, not the fact that it's not viewable from the street. So I just wondered what others think. And I know we often do this, but here we have a different situation. We have a series of houses that don't have that condition, and I think maybe establishing this one with such a large, high addition in the back would change the character and therefore be inappropriate.
Right, and one of the things I think in this particular design, which is a little bit different from what we've approved, is usually at the penthouse level. It sets back 3 feet, which is usually the minimum, but the whole face of the building sets back. So here they have this sort of intriguing kind of detail, which is it's this chamfered sort of frame. And while it's a nice design feature, perhaps that also, if the intent is to have a recessive sort of effect by setting it back and allowing the cornice at the rear to read, then perhaps the frame actually works against that, and that's one thing that could probably be eliminated to do that, and along with working on a different kind of connection to the top floor, through the roof. Yes?
Yeah, I agree with other commissioners about this. It seems very large in the context of this block, and obviously there's a few other rooftop additions, but not many, and this really gives the appearance of a two-story addition just because it's so bulky. And I wouldn't, I don't think a two-story addition is appropriate here. So there are a lot of ways to address this, but I just feel it's much too bulky.
Well, yeah. I mean, another thing is why the roof, there are many things that they've done here which I think makes it look very bulky. Personally, I think just if you strip it of all that, it's not that different from many things we've approved. But at the top floor, they have their canopy, they have a wall. If they just had the bulkhead, it would be very different, and then the enframement as well. So
one thing that might be good next time is aerial views are not particularly helpful
they're not
to
sometimes.
the applicant.
Especially, it sort of looms at you in a very different way.
Well, they're good and they're honest, and that's wonderful, but I mean,
Well, there are a few that
normally
we
we do judge things by what one sees from the
Mhm.
ground level, and so it might be making it worse than it actually is.
Other comments? All right, so we can ask them to work with staff regarding the bulkhead. Oh, these are, yes, I can put them in. Okay, and in terms of, so if we ask them to do that, what about the enframement? Thoughts about that?
We're going to see it again.
I don't think we need to see it again. I would recommend that perhaps they remove the enframement. It's much more akin to what we've allowed elsewhere, and it seems that the commissioners are sort of responding to somehow the overwhelming effect
Yeah,
of the rear.
that contributes a lot to it. Is it set back far enough?
I think we'd want it to be set back at least 3 feet, like we've.
3 feet to the glass now?
It's 3 feet, but then it sort of projects forward because it's sort of framed. Right, because. Isn't that correct?
They could also choose to make the
Exactly.
I do too.
And keep,
we gotta tell them they gotta rip off their detail if they like break.
And how tall is it? I mean, there's a lot of, it's just big.
Yeah, no, along to Michael's point, or have it slightly set back.
well, okay. I was thinking of, well, that's what, I think that I was just recommending some simple moves that would not necessarily require them to come back and gives them the same amount of square footage, so, but yes, they could make it smaller and keep that detail, but then they'll lose something else.
In this case, it should be set further back than
Right.
our standard 3 feet. I mean,
Right.
Really?
this is,
Yeah, yeah.
just because the row is so consistent without it.
Yeah.
And the neighbor, at least as it's been explained, that has a rooftop addition, this is not an accurate rendering of it.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that accurately,
Yeah.
if possible. I sort of like to see it better.
Well, I'm just looking at,
Commissioners, if
I'm also okay with
we
it.
work with, if staff works with the architect to lower the stair bulkhead and perhaps bring in the width of the addition while keeping the chamfer, that's an important element too.
okay, is that fine? So they would set it back further, reduce the height of the bulkhead, but they want to keep the
It's an,
chamfered frame.
that's a design feature.
And they'll work with staff on that. Are we okay with that?
So do they push it, the whole thing back further? Or not?
They'll push it back further.
Could somebody just, I don't know, what's the,
How many?
how many feet is it now?
It's 3 feet now. It's 3 feet to the glass now. We can move it to 5 feet to the glass.
Make it 3 feet to the tip of the bulkhead.
That's fine, so it's another 3 feet, right? Right, I mean, these photos are really from the rooftop of
Give you
the
a sense
neighbors.
of where
Well,
it
but
is,
it's
yeah.
from a private view.
Yeah, it just gives you a little,
All right, so if they set it back another 3 feet? Yes, the frame sets back, and then within that, the glass sets back. Okay, I think we're good with that?
I think this chamfer element, it's an architectural element that is completely not necessary. It's a statement, but here it's a statement, for me, that goes against the backyards. It's gonna enlarge itself, no matter how much you put it out, you're gonna see it, and it makes it seem bigger. And I'm for making it seem smaller. So maybe alone,
Well,
I'm not sure.
let me just, are the other commissioners okay with this design feature, if it's set back? Okay. All right, so John?
In the matter of docket number 19-4140, 81 Charles Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District, the application is to construct rooftop and rear additions and excavate the cellar and rear yard. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features.
Sorry, what do we do about the granite situation?
The granite situation, why don't we just say, let them work with staff.
Really pay attention to it.
Okay, I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. I recommend approval, noting that the proposed work will not alter, eliminate, or destroy any significant architectural features of the building, that the proposed rooftop addition will be set back from the front facade, and the rear addition will not rise the full height of the building, thereby helping to retain defining aspects of the building's original scale and massing. That the occupiable portion of the rooftop addition will be typical in terms of height, that the trellis, wood fence, and high point of the bulkhead will be modest in footprint and constructed away from the front and rear of the building, and will not result in the cumulative effect of the rooftop constructions overwhelming the building. That the proposed rear addition will be in keeping with other rear additions at row houses within this block in terms of form, number of floors, and projection into the rear yard, thereby helping the addition to retain a harmonious presence. That the proposed rear addition will feature a solid to void ratio, which will be compatible with the residential scale and character of this row house. That the scoring and texture of the proposed cement fiberboard cladding for the additions will help this modern material recall in a contemporary way the scale and texture of masonry and metalwork units historically used at buildings of this type, style, and age. That the block features a variety of tall fences and walls at the ground level of the rear yards. Therefore, the presence of a solid wood fence with a maximum height of 8'10" will not diminish the continuity of the central green space. That the proposed excavation will not extend to the rear lot line, thereby maintaining an area for significant plantings in the rear yard. That the excavation and related underpinning will be done in compliance with Department of Buildings regulations under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer or registered architect to protect the building's facades and the adjacent buildings. That except for the rooftop flues, none of the work will be visible from a public thoroughfare, and that the flues will feature a dull metal finish and will be simply designed typical in terms of placement and only visible from public thoroughfares from select vantage points within the context of a row, which features accretions of similar type, size, and placement. The applicant will work with staff to lower the stair bulkhead, to set back the rear side of the rooftop addition so that it's 3 feet from the rear edge of the top floor of the building. And they will work with staff in addition to pay particular attention to the excavation work that might be impacted by the existence of granite.
Second, all in favor? Any opposed? One opposed. The application's approved.